Television had never seen a betrayal as this one. Happy Days bid America one of television's most emotional goodbyes, only for ABC to rip it apart in one night and leave the cast behind in the devastation. In 1984, the series was slated to conclude with Tom Bosley's tearful farewell, a genuine and heartfelt moment of closure after 11 grueling seasons with the Cunningham family. But that error by ABC devastated the fans and broke the legacy of the show. How did it all go so horribly wrong? And how did 5 forgotten shows resurface from the dead to ruin a classic? The secret fight that almost destroyed Happy Days. Ron Howard was willing to leave Happy Days. By the late 1970s, the young actor who had shouldered the sitcom since 1974 presented an ultimatum that sent shivers through ABC's executive suites. It was not a matter of salary disputes or creative control. It was simply 2 words the network wanted to add to the title. By its 3rd year, Happy Days had become a cultural phenomenon. Families tuned in week after week, advertisers camped out, and the cast members were household names. But it wasn't Richie Cunningham, the quintessential all-American teenager played by Howard, who was fueling the mania. It was Arthur Fonzarelli. Henry Winkler's Fonzie, complete with leather jacket, motorcycle, and requisite i.e., had stolen the show. He began as a supporting actor, but soon became a phenomenon. Children emulated his look, toy stores were unable to stock Fonzie items, and ratings indicated that people watched his every scene. ABC executives came up with an idea then, to retitle the show Fonzie's Happy Days. In theory, it was good marketing. In reality, it was about to rewrite the show's own DNA. To Ron Howard, this was not simply a matter of a minor title change. It was a personal affront. He had made Richie Cunningham one of the most familiar faces on television, the heart of the show's emotion. Being pushed to second billing in the show he had helped make a hit was an affront. By the mid-1970s, tensions were simmering behind the scenes of Happy Days. Howard, America's clean-cut Richie Cunningham since the very first episode, found himself suddenly confronted with a test that had the potential to rewrite television history. As Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, rode to the stratosphere of popularity, ABC management again tossed around the possibility of changing the show's title to Fonzie's Happy Days. On paper, it was a brilliant branding play, but in practice, it threatened to destroy the very delicate balance that made the show a success. In a stern conference with creator Gary Marshall and the network bosses, Howard didn't blink. He informed them straightforwardly that if the title was altered, he was gone. No haggling, no going back. It had nothing to do with ego. It was about maintaining the show's integrity. At 21 years of age, Howard knew something that the bosses overlooked. Happy Days was not a one-man show. Fonzie's cool succeeded only because it was counterbalanced by Richie's accessible charm, Marion's kindness, and the rest of the Cunningham clan's energy. Insiders were stunned. Young actors didn't rebel against network directives, particularly not over something as trivial as a title. But Howard's defiance made ABC retreat and leave Happy Days as the ensemble show fans remember today. The twist came when Henry Winkler, the man at the center of the debate, took Howard's side. He told the executives plainly, "Why fix it if it's not broken? My success depends on the ensemble I'm in." Fonzie may have been the breakout star, but Winkler knew the magic only worked because of the cast around him. That unity ended the title change fight for good. Gary Marshall stood behind his cast and left Happy Days alone, but the conflict left its marks. Howard started taking the possibility of leaving acting to become a director seriously, a choice that would ultimately make him one of the most valued filmmakers in Hollywood. In retrospect, this battle over 2 words previewed the deeper issues within ABC. The same executives who nearly lost their top male star over a branding choice would subsequently botch the show's scheduling and series finale, making what should have been a flawless goodbye into one of television's oddest send-offs. This wasn't just about pride. It spoke to the perpetual struggle between creativity and corporate bottom line that defined television for decades. To ABC, Fonzie was a cash-generating brand. To the cast and creators, he was a character who only worked in the world that they had so painstakingly created. But Howard's ultimatum was only half the story. Once the spotlight finally faded, it was Henry Winkler, not Ron Howard, who had the toughest battle. Underneath the applause, the catchphrases, and the signature leather jacket, the actor who played television's coolest guy was concealing a pain that no one in the crowd could detect. What was Winkler hiding beneath Fonzie's flawless grin? The untold pain behind the Fonz's cool smile. Henry Winkler was broke when he auditioned for Happy Days. In 1973, the actor who would soon define American cool arrived in Hollywood with barely a month's rent saved. He had left New York after years of struggling in the theater, where steady work was rare and paychecks were small. Winkler later admitted his finances were dire. He wasn't chasing fame anymore. He was chasing survival. The irony is strong. The guy who would go on to portray Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, the most self-assured character on television, was a nervous wreck when he entered that audition room. He read for the role of a leather-jacketed motorcycle biker, a role that was intended originally as comic relief. Somehow, against the odds, he landed the job, and that one moment didn't just alter his career, it altered his life. But also television history. By Happy Days' third season, there was a new monarch of TV, and his name was Arthur Fonzarelli. What started as a small supporting role, scripted for a mere 5 lines per week, burst into a cultural epidemic. The Fonz was not just a character. He was a national fixation. Children all over America echoed his IE catchphrase in school corridors. Barbers noticed young lads inquiring about his slicked-back look, and stores couldn't keep Fonzie lunchboxes, T-shirts, and action figures on their shelves. Henry Winkler, who had previously been a struggling stage actor prior to securing the role, found himself overnight one of America's most recognized faces. He adorned the covers of magazines, made guest appearances on talk shows, and got more fan mail than the entire cast put together. People didn't merely enjoy the Fonz. They watched each week expressly to see what he would do next. By 1976, Fonzie was being scripted into almost every plotline, and producers went so far as to relocate his character into the Cunningham home to get him more time on camera. In just 2 years, Henry Winkler had become a pop culture phenomenon, changing Happy Days and television itself in perpetuity. But with fame came an unstated price. For over a decade, Winkler was the Fonz. The leather jacket, the motorcycle, the slick-back hair, these weren't merely character traits. They became a part of his identity. He identified so fully with the character that the distinction between Henry Winkler and Arthur Fonzarelli became indistinct. When Happy Days ended in 1984 after 11 years, Winkler was not ready for what followed. He afterward characterized the show's conclusion as a sting, but the term barely began to convey the extent of his turmoil. It was as though he had lost a member of his family. For a decade, he had been the Fonz, and then the camera shut off. The bravado dissolved with the character, and he stood in front of an identity crisis. It wasn't merely about getting the next gig. It was about responding to a more frightening question. Who was Henry Winkler without the Fonz? For more than a decade, the world had seen him only through that one lens. Casting directors, viewers, and even Hollywood itself couldn't distinguish the actor from the character. Typecasting affected him greatly. He was thankful for the part that made him rich, but simultaneously trapped by it. The stress suffocated. Winkler did confess that he was afraid of falling back into the financial woes that plagued him prior to Happy Days. He'd accomplished all actors ever fantasize about: fame, money, and cultural immortality. But deep inside, he still felt the same insecurity he'd had when he came to California with a handful of dollars in his pocket. Hollywood wasn't helping either. The Fonz had transcended a character. It was an American icon of cool. Fans didn't care to see Henry Winkler as a physician, a lawyer, or an educator. They needed the Fonz. Shedding such an icon-like image appeared nearly impossible. Repeatedly rejected and doubting himself, Winkler grappled for several years. He adored the character for whom he became famous, but he was convinced his career would be over the instant Happy Days ended. It was an emotional burden he bore in secret, even as the public continued to view him as the fellow who could get jukeboxes to play just by snapping his fingers. Henry Winkler did not vanish, however. Gradually, he remade himself. During the 1980s, when acting work was scarce, he went into directing, working off-screen on MacGyver and Cop and a Half. Soon, he started rebuilding his career as an actor with new roles that demonstrated his range, such as his cameo as Principal Himbry in Scream and his Emmy-nominated performance in Arrested Development. Years later, his work on HBO's Barry at last brought in the accolades he had so long desired, with an Emmy win in 2018. Nevertheless, Winkler has been candid about just how hurtful the post-Happy Days era were. He confessed in interviews that the emotional wounds lingered long after the show had ended. Fame had brought him everything he had ever hoped for, but it almost stole his sense of self. While Henry Winkler was fighting his own personal demons, ABC executives were getting ready to make a move that would ignite an even greater crisis. What rule did they so recklessly break? The 1984 Olympics spoiled Happy Days. February 1984 was the day that ABC was to hold its head high. The network had won exclusive rights to cover the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, a worldwide spectacle that was expected to bring massive ratings, prestige, and millions from ad revenue. But beneath the hoopla, ABC committed one of the worst scheduling errors in television history. A choice so cataclysmic, it permanently altered the way networks approach finales, programming conflicts, and even the viewing public's relationship with their favorite shows. This is the lost catastrophe that turned Happy Days, America's favorite sitcom, into the first zombie series on TV. Initially, it seemed like a classic scheduling issue. The Sarajevo Games aired from February 8 through February 19, 1984. ABC, the rights owner, cleared its prime time for nightly figure skating, skiing, and ice hockey coverage. This resulted in some shows being bumped from their traditional time slots, among them Happy Days, already in its last season after 11 years on the air. The episodes that were displaced weren't filler of any sort. They were scheduled to be aired in February as part of the show's last lap before its grand farewell. ABC executives had a dilemma: postpone the finale to summer in order to ensure all the shows went on the air in sequence, or hold on to their May finale plans and worry about what to do with the remaining episodes later. They went for the second, and that decision violated television's holy rule. On May 8, 1984, Happy Days broadcast its series finale, Passages. It was a tearful goodbye. Joni and Chachi became engaged. Fonzie, the cultural icon of the show, finally became an adoptive father. And Tom Bosley, as Mr. Cunningham, toasted family and friendship with a warm and loving speech. For millions of viewers, this was closure. They bid farewell to the characters who had defined 1970s American television after over a decade of viewing. But ABC